Welcome to Newsday on the BBC. I'm Marie Goy in Singapore. The headlines. Mark Zuckerberg admits Facebook made mistakes mishandling data from 50 million users, and he promises to make changes. The suspect in the Texas bombings blows himself up as police closed in. But what motivated 23-year-old Mark Condit?
I'm Sharanjit Lail in London, also on the programme. Out of control and plummeting to Earth, China's first space station could crash land any time, but no one knows where.
It is magic until you understand it, and thereafter, it's mathematics.
And we meet a teacher you can really count on, the YouTube sensation who's making maths fun.
Live from our studios in Singapore and London. This is BBC World News. It's Newsday.
Good morning. It's 9 a.m. here in Singapore, 1 a.m. in London, and 6 p.m. in San Francisco, where the founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, has admitted that the social networking site made mistakes over its handling of user data. These are the first public comments he has made since the British firm Cambridge Analytica was accused of mining information to influence the American presidential election in 2016. On his Facebook page, he said that the company needed to step up to fix the problems. Our business editor Simon Jack has the latest.
Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg broke his silence tonight on a scandal that has engulfed the social media giant. In a Facebook post, he said the company had a responsibility to protect your data and admitted the company had made mistakes. He described how a British academic had invented an app inviting Facebook users to do a personality test. 300,000 people downloaded it. It collected personal information on them and also all of their Facebook friends, harvesting data on 50 million users. That data was obtained by a British consultancy, Cambridge Analytica, in 2014, a move Zuckerberg described tonight as a breach of trust, and it was later allegedly used in the Trump election campaign. A campaign the company's executives took a lot of credit for when secretly filmed, an apparent shock to the original app designer.
Our data informed all the strategy. Never in our wildest dreams did we think anything we did would be used in the Donald Trump campaign, right? I mean, this is 2014, well before anybody would think Mr. Trump would be a serious candidate. So at the time, I didn't know who their clients were going to be. I didn't really know the specific use case. I did know it was going to be used for political purposes, but beyond that, it was well above my pay grade. Should have asked.
Could this small consultancy really have altered the course of US history? Unlikely, says a man who worked on Barack Obama's 2008 election.
Data can be misused to increase divisions and stoke fears, as they themselves have said, and that's why it needs to be regulated more carefully, and ethical behaviour needs to be enforced. Elections are decided by a whole range of factors, and I think that Cambridge Analytica overclaimed their impact.
Zuckerberg said Facebook would conduct a full audit of apps with suspicious activity, ban apps that break the rules or refuse to be audited, and make it harder for developers to access data in the future. Perhaps the biggest change will be our awareness of what we're agreeing to when we hit I agree.
The conversation we should be having is what happens to our data, how much are we comfortable to share, who are we comfortable to share it with, and what do we think about how that's done. So this feels to me like a real light bulb moment where people are understanding that it's not just clicking like on Facebook, what you're doing there is giving data away.
Facebook's value has fallen by $50 billion since Monday, and today's announcement didn't see that reverse, evidence perhaps of lasting damage on Facebook's brand and its users' trust. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Well, our technology correspondent in just about half an hour, so stay tuned for that. But let's take a look now at some of the day's other news. The war of words has increased between London and Moscow over the spy poisoning case. At a parliamentary hearing on Wednesday, the British Foreign Secretary was asked if the Russian president would use the World Cup in the same way that Hitler used the 1936 Olympics. Have a listen.
Putin's going to use it the way Hitler used the 1936 Olympics. The idea of Putin handing over the World Cup to the captain of the winning team.
I'm afraid that's completely right.
Well,
that's completely right.
The idea of Putin using this as a PR exercise to gloss over the brutal, corrupt regime for which he's responsible fills me with horror.
First of all, I think that your characterisation of what is going to happen in Moscow, in the World Cup, on all the venues, yes, I think the comparison with 1936 is certainly right, and I think it's an emetic prospect, frankly, to think of Putin glorying in this sporting event.
Boris Johnson there. Also making news today, more than 100 Nigerian schoolgirls abducted by Islamist militants last month in the town of Dapchi have been freed. 5 girls are said to have teeth. And another, the only Christian in the group, has not been released. The government denies paying Boko Haram a ransom. Local media is reporting the girls are exhausted and underfed. At least 31 people have been killed in a suicide bombing in the Afghan capital, Kabul. The bomber was apparently heading towards a well-known shrine where a large crowd had gathered to mark the start of the New Year festival. The Islamic State group said it carried out the attack. The pilot of the jet that crashed at a British air show in 2015 is to be charged with the manslaughter by gross negligence of the 11 people who died on the ground. Andrew Hill is also accused of endangering an aircraft and is due to appear before magistrates next month. A Palestinian teenager who was filmed slapping an has accepted a plea deal that will mean that she serves 8 months in prison. Ahed Tamimi agreed to plead guilty to 4 of the 12 charges she faced, including assault. The 17-year-old was detained after confronting 2 armed soldiers outside her home in December. Let's take a look at these pictures now of a new rift that's developed in Kenya's Rift Valley, where geologists are warning that a huge crack could be showing signs that the continent is splitting. Now, the earth movements began last week and were exacerbated by heavy rains tearing apart large sections of the Suswa area in southwestern Kenya. And while the continental split could take millions of years, the immediate concern is the safety of road users and the people living there.
Now, the suspect, who's linked to a series of deadly package bombs in Austin, Texas, has died. The man has been identified as 23-year-old Mark Anthony Condit, and he's detonated an explosive as police closed in on him. Experts have removed explosive device components from his home, but they're warning that he may have planted or mailed other bombs as well. Gary O'Donoghue has been following the story.
Police closed in on the suspected bomber in the early hours, tracking him down to a hotel north of Austin. While they waited for extra backup, he drove off to a ditch at the side of the road. As the police approached his car, he set off another bomb.
As members of the Austin Police Department SWAT team approached the vehicle, the suspect detonated a bomb inside the vehicle, knocking one of our SWAT officers back, and one of our SWAT officers fired at the suspect as well. The suspect is deceased and has significant injuries from a blast that occurred from detonating a bomb inside his vehicle.
CCTV in the past couple of days showed the suspect dropping off a package at a FedEx office in southwest Austin, a key piece of evidence that led the police to the bomber's identity. He's now been named officially. Mark Anthony Condit was a 23-year-old man who lived in Pflugerville, just outside the city. A school friend of the suspect I spoke to didn't want to be identified, but she said he seemed like a normal boy.
I would definitely say that I'm completely surprised. I wouldn't have been this shocked if it was somebody that I didn't know, but seeing that this is someone who I, share memories with, even though it's just a little bit, is really crazy to me. I just know that regardless of his personal reasoning, it was an act of evil and it's not excusable.
Since the beginning of the month, there have been 6 separate bombs, 5 of which have exploded. 2 men have died and half a dozen people have suffered serious injuries. A number are still in hospital. During the day, the police with dogs searched a number of addresses associated with Condit, evacuating some buildings and cordoning off areas. They also questioned both his flatmates, though neither has been arrested or charged. Police still don't know the motive for this bombing spree that's terrorised Austin for the past 3 weeks. They're also telling the public they don't know where the suspect has been for the past 24 hours, so there could still be devices out there. Gary O'Donoghue, BBC News, Austin, Texas.
Taiwanese authorities have detained 9 Taiwanese and 29 foreigners, almost all Vietnamese nationals, in a suspected human trafficking operation. On Monday, 2 Vietnamese migrants died when their rubber dinghy capsized in high waves off the coast of Taitung. Upon further search, Coast Guards found several others hiding on shore, as well as a larger boat off the beach with more Vietnamese migrants waiting to be taken ashore. Well, our correspondent in Taipei, Cindy Su, has more on this story.
What we're hearing from the authorities is that they're questioning the 9 Taiwanese people for suspected involvement in organizing this human trafficking operation. Now, normally, like you said, we don't see these types of cases where people are being smuggled in boats to Taiwan. But human trafficking does exist in Taiwan. And as you know, Taiwan is an island, so there are a lot of coastlines. And this case may just be unusual in the sense that it was detected. There may have been other cases that were undetected. But the authorities say that they do have a pretty good system in place, a radar detection system. And that's how they found the boat on Monday off the shore, a speedboat that was trying to arrive into the shore of eastern Taiwan. And they believe that they will continue to spot any future cases that might come up.
Right. Now, Cindy, we know there are official channels for many migrants to enter Taiwan. So why would Vietnamese nationals in particular try to enter Taiwan in this way?
Well, it's believed that many migrants, especially from Vietnam, try to avoid the high fees that brokers in Vietnam and Taiwan charge them to help them find jobs and bring them to Taiwan. So many people, especially from Vietnam, where the fees could be as high as $10,000, try to avoid paying the fees by coming here illegally. Now, some of them come here legally and then escape from their jobs and work in the black market illegally. But this is an unusual case where we see 30-something people being brought here in boats, potentially to work here illegally, working for very low wages and putting themselves at risk of being exploited.
Cindy Su, our correspondent in Taipei, speaking to Sharon earlier. You're watching Newsday on the BBC. Still to come on the programme. Aid agencies call for universal access to clean water and warn the poor are at risk.
And also on the programme, nature by numbers. We meet the YouTube sensation doing sums on sunflowers.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsday on the BBC. I'm Marie Goy in Singapore.
And I'm Sharonjit Lail in London. Thanks for staying with us. Our top stories. Facebook has admitted making mistakes and breaching trust with its users over a data harvesting scandal. Its boss, Mark Zuckerberg, has reportedly said he's open to testifying before the US Congress.
The suspect in a series of deadly parcel bombs blows himself up as Texas police closed in on his vehicle. Now let's take a look at some front pages from around the world, and we start with Singapore's Straits Times, which has a report on one very brave patient who underwent a brain surgery while still awake. O.G. Long is seen as giving a thumbs up even while going under the knife, and surgeons managed to remove a cancerous growth from his brain. Meanwhile, the New York Times wonders if the film director Steven Spielberg can still deliver a blockbuster. The question came as his new fiction epic hits cinemas. In the last few years, his more serious movies have been doing quite well at the box office. And finally, the front page of the Japan Times shows a picture of pedestrians in Tokyo struggling with the snow. The country, of course, is in the spring, but the winter weather shows no sign of slacking off, and increasing low pressure is being blamed.
Now, when China launched its first space station 7 years ago, no one had dreamed that the mission will end up being an embarrassment out of control and threatening to fall out of space, to crash to Earth. Due to a technical glitch, China lost control of the Tiangong-1 after it was decommissioned in 2013. The 9-ton station has been spinning out of control ever since, and according to some experts, it's on course to crash to Earth within days. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to an expert on space debris, Dr. Bill Aylor of the Aerospace Corporation. I asked him how likely it was the Chinese space station would fall down on Earth.
Well, it's very likely it's going to crash down to Earth, but it's quite unlikely that it'll actually hurt someone.
And why do you say that?
Well, we have, the last couple of years, we each had events roughly of this size, where objects this size came down. I think 3 in 2016 and 4 in 2017. So it's not that uncommon. It's not the largest object that's ever come down. And we've had many things come down since we've been in the space age. There's only been one person brushed on the shoulder by a small piece of debris, and so we wouldn't expect anything here.
All right. And so, you know, with technology these days, there must be a way that you can monitor things like this, space debris, and potentially predict when and where it might fall.
That's true. We actually do our best job of trying to figure out where these things will come down. Unfortunately, when the satellite starts getting low in the atmosphere like this one is, the atmosphere is continually changing, and so we try to estimate what the density is going to be along its path. That is made more difficult because sun activity and some other things, solar storms and so forth, cause the atmosphere to change a little bit in density. Those small changes make a big difference in the long term, and so it's extremely difficult to isolate even what orbit something will come down in.
Right. Now, we know this project was a big deal for China's space ambitions when it was first launched in 2011. So just how much of a blow is this to the Chinese? How much of an embarrassment is it?
Well, you know, it's sad that any entity loses control of its spacecraft, and it's certainly not a planned thing, but it does happen. And when you lose control or you can't communicate with a spacecraft, you're basically out of luck. It'll come down when it's ready.
And will the Chinese take responsibility for any damage that might come out of this?
Basically, the entity that launches the satellite is in fact responsible for what happens when it re-enters, and so if there's damage, it would be their responsibility to deal with it, yes.
Now, it's incredibly easy to take clean water for granted when all you have to do is turn on the tap. But on the 25th World Water Day, the Australian group WaterAid is drawing attention to what they're calling the water gap. They say 60% of the world's population is now living in water-stressed areas. And this year's report also includes new data on the gap between the rich and the poor when it comes to access to water. It estimates that 844 million people have no clean water near their homes. Earlier, I spoke to Rosie Ween, who is the Chief Executive of WaterAid Australia, and she started by outlining her concerns for access to water.
Every single day, 800 children die from diarrhea, and we know that's preventable with access to clean water, decent toilets and good hygiene practices. So we do need to look around the region and see that there are countries that really are falling behind in terms of achieving universal access for everyone. The 3 worst countries that we can see globally are Eritrea, Papua New Guinea and Uganda. So we really do need to focus our attention on those that are falling behind.
We do have some cases in Asia where countries have managed to improve the situation quite a lot. What exactly can the governments do?
You're right, we are seeing some really good progress. For example, India, where still many people don't have access to safe water, but in the last 15 years, over 300 million people have got access to safe water. We know that we can solve this crisis, and there are key things that governments need to do. There needs to be political leadership, there needs to be financing, there needs to be a focus on the capacity and skills that are needed. We need to really look at how we manage the world's most precious resource, water, and make sure that there's water for agriculture, industry, but also for domestic basic needs. And of course, we mustn't forget to focus on the poorest and ensure that no one is left behind, and we ensure that everyone gets access to clean water.
We also have, of course, countries like Singapore, which have turned things around very quickly. But tell us about this water gap. Do you feel that this gap between the rich and the poor, that still exists in many countries?
As you say, great lessons to take from the experience of Singapore, and that is one of the things that we really are championing. We do, though, need to highlight, as you say, the gap between the rich and poor. There are countries, for example, Pakistan, where we look at a national level and it's about 88% of people have access to safe water. But if we drill into the numbers, we see that when we look at the poorest people, there's only 79% have access to water, whereas the wealthier people, it's 98% of people have access to water. And when I talk to people, particularly women, for example, in Papua New Guinea, and I talk to them and understand the impact it has on their lives not having water, the time that's wasted, the heavy burdens that they have to carry, it's really holding the progress of individuals, families and countries back by not ensuring everyone has access to clean water.
And that was Rosie Ween speaking earlier to Mariko. Now, Australian teacher Eddie Wu has won fans worldwide with his high-energy maths lessons posted online. Now, Mr. Wu recently won Australia's Local Hero Award, and he was a finalist for the Global Teacher Prize. Now, he's been explaining his formula for infectious lessons to the BBC in Sydney.
My name is Eddie Wu. I'm the head teacher of mathematics at Cherrybrook Technology High School in Sydney, Australia.
I'm going to put on, to finish my definition, I'm going to put on 2 more words.
When I started making these videos, I only did it with one student in mind. He was very sick, and so he was missing huge amounts of class. So for this to have gotten around the country, all around the world, for me is just endlessly surprising. I get comments every now and then, and they say, "Who is this Asian guy, and what is that accent coming out of his mouth?" Because they can't pick the Australian accent.
Eddie, congratulations.
What I'm really aiming for, I guess, is to help people think about mathematics as not a scary subject or not something that's really challenging and only for special people, but I want people to see that it's accessible, that it's understandable. I do want to get at that sense of wonder that students, that the human beings have. When you see something, you think, how did that happen? There's this famous saying that it is magic until you understand it, and thereafter, it's mathematics.
How many cards did you get that matched on both sides? I've heard people who got 8 and 8, 4 and 4. I've heard a 7 and 7, a 6 and 6.
It opens up a whole universe of seeing things in a new way that you never could have believed or imagined before. Just go outside and pick up a flower. Have a look at the pattern of seeds that's there, and that spiral, that shape. There's an unmistakable pattern there that can be explained mathematically. Mathematics is there all around us if only we have eyes to see it. So I encourage everyone to look around them and see the patterns around them and wonder, but don't stop there. Ask why. Go and look up a reason and find out, and you yourself will become a mathematician.
Math teacher extraordinaire Eddie Wu there. Now, Mariko, I have to say, I wish my math teacher had been like him. I would have paid a lot more attention in class and probably scored a lot better on my math lessons as well. What about you, Mariko?
Math definitely wasn't my favourite either, but I remember when I first moved to Australia, interestingly, my favourite subject was history, and I said I want to do history, and all my teachers said, no, your English isn't good enough, you should do math because you're Asian, you must be good at it. So there you go, I did some damage to the reputation of Asians being good at math there. You've been watching Newsday on the BBC. Stay with us because I'll be back with business news, and the new US Federal Reserve Chairman has announced his first ever interest rate hike. We'll look at how that could affect people at home and around the world.
And that's it from me and Mariko for Newsday. Stay with us on BBC World News.